Hey everyone, I want to examine yet another passage in the Tanakh that Messianics always seem to point to as some kind of proof of a New Testament Messiah. So today, let's examine Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. We made quite a few videos by now where we've taken a hard look at some passages in the Tanakh that Messianics seem to always refer to as some kind of prophetic proof of a New Testament Messiah. For example, Deuteronomy 18:15, Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 9:6, Isaiah chapter 53, Daniel 7:13-14, the 70 weeks of Daniel in chapter 9, or Psalms chapter 22. These are some of the more popular ones in the Tanakh that are taken out of context or completely misunderstood by Messianics. We have videos examining all of those passages, and today we're going to add to that list by examining Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. So let's read that verse in its entirety to get started. Zechariah 12:10. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look on me whom they pierced, and shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. And they shall be in bitterness over him as a bitterness over the firstborn. Obviously, the Messianics are going to gravitate to the whom they pierced part of this verse, claiming it points to a New Testament Messiah that was supposedly pierced either by crucifixion nails or by a spear while he was hanging on a cross after his death. Once again, people run into trouble when a verse like this is ripped completely out of context and used without knowing why it was spoken or by who. For starters, if people were to read the book of Zechariah, it's plain to see this part of the book is talking about the end of days. For a clue, we should see how the verse reads right before verse 10 in Zechariah 12:9. And it shall be in that day that I seek to destroy all the Gentiles that come up against Jerusalem. And in the next chapter is another clue in verse 13:2. And it shall be in that day, declares Jehovah of hosts, that I cut off the names of the idols from the earth, and they shall be remembered no more. And I shall also remove the prophets and the unclean spirit from the earth. So this is obviously describing events at the end of days. Names of idols are still here and remembered, and there's still unclean spirits all around the earth. So in other words, this hadn't happened yet. That word that was used for pierced in Zechariah 12:10 is the Hebrew word dakar, which means to stab, pierce, strike, thrust through, or wound. We just read verse 13:2. Let's read that together with a verse that follows it and hear what's in that verse for a clue. Zechariah 13:2-3. And it shall come to pass in that day, says Jehovah of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. And it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, You shall not live, for you speak lies in the name of Jehovah. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesies. The Hebrew dakar was used there as well for thrust him through. So that's another verse for comparison with dakar in it, like 12:10, for a better understanding. But there's another issue with this passage in question. It may not be too easy to spot at first, but once you see it, it jumps right out at you. So let's read part of that verse again in Zechariah 12:10. And they shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. So as we just heard, the verse reads, They shall look on me whom they pierced. This obviously gives the impression that the one speaking is the one being pierced. But then it goes on to say, And they shall mourn for him. So let's hear that again. They shall look on me whom they pierced, and they shall mourn for him. That doesn't even make sense. That's because the translation is so terrible. This is how Zechariah 12:10 should read. And I shall pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of favor and prayers. And they shall look to me concerning who was thrust through. And they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. And they shall be in bitterness over him as bitterness over the firstborn. This is talking about a person or persons here who will be killed, and the people will be in mourning because of it. Zechariah is pertaining to the time of the end, not pertaining to a time of some kind of New Testament Messiah. The thrusting through is for a time that's still to come. It didn't happen almost 2,000 years ago. Since the Christians believe that their Messiah was raised from the dead, if this way of thinking was accurate, wouldn't they be rejoicing instead of mourning? Would you mourn over someone that's alive or dead? You know, there's a lot of Christians and Messianics that interpret Zechariah 12:10 something like this. It's going to be the Jews that killed the Messiah that are going to be mourning someday when they realize it was him that they pierced. You know, if the Jews messed up that bad, tell me why a few chapters earlier we can read this in Zechariah 8:23. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, in those days 10 men from all languages of the nation shall take hold, yea, they shall take hold of the edge of the garment of a man, a Yehudite, or a Jew, saying, let us go with you, for we have heard that Elohim is with you. So once again, a lot of the Christian and Messianic ways of thinking just isn't logical or based on scriptural truth. But this is what happens when people rip verses like this completely out of context or don't study enough to get to the truth. They keep passing down Christian doctrine and thought, and it gets repeated without them even understanding that they're simply repeating false doctrine. They haven't learned anything, they're just repeating what they heard in church, what they heard their pastor say, or what they believed for their entire lives. You know, I remember back in my churchianity days, we were all taught that, oh, the poor Jews are so blind because they don't understand the New Testament and believe that Jesus died for their sins, so they're lost. Well, maybe the Jews know the Tanakh so well that they aren't falling for that New Testament and its phony Messiah. And when a lot of us who weren't Jews but who were in the Christian church started researching this for ourselves once we started keeping the Sabbath and the significance of keeping the Torah and the feast for today, we put the New Testament up against the Tanakh, we saw it failed miserably. So we're not falling for those lies any longer. And a lot more people are seeing this now, and hallelujah for that, because that's wonderful. Well, I hope this video blessed you and it brought a deeper understanding of this verse in Zechariah. Shalom to all who are truly Yisrael and scattered worldwide in the dispersion. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.